Welcome to Shade in the City. I am your girl Treese, and yes, I am here very late, but I figured, you know what, I might as well push through and just sleep on the plane. So, I'm here to give you the recap for Beyond the Gates, season 1, episode 53 and 54. So those will be Thursday and Friday's episode. Shout out to all my members that were in the members only live. We had a good old time last night. Yeah, y'all, I just been tired. I've been really tired. So I apologize for getting this up a little late, but as promised, I will make sure that I get it out before I get out the country. Okay. If you guys haven't already, please make sure you hit that like button and also make sure you subscribe as well. Let's get into it and let's get shady. Right, y'all. So warning. Okay. DNA are still having issues living together. That's why I'm gonna end that. Okay. If y'all want to go into it in the comments, you're more than welcome to, but I ain't got it to do over here. So then we see Naomi. She's down at All for Jeans getting donuts for her little coffee date that she has with Ashley when Chelsea rolls up on her. And so Naomi lets her know that she's about to meet Ashley. And Chelsea asks if Jan knows everything that's going on or what went down. And Naomi tells her she absolutely does know and has experienced it because she was friends with the crazy lady. Okay. So Chelsea tells her that must mean that everyone's heard about, Bill's role in all of the mess. And so Naomi says that Bill hasn't really given a clear answer on his role. He hasn't really said anything in his text. So Chelsea says, well, that's just because, of course, dad just wants it to go away. So now we pivot over to Bill, who was at his office when he gets a visit from Five Guys. Can I tell you, we had a good old time talking about this in the membership, okay? This was a great scene. I think I've been saying, I actually said I would have liked to see them join forces, but this scene between Bill and Leslie was great. Okay. And I would love to see more Bill and Leslie scenes because for once, I think Bill actually, like, even though he walks around with his chest puffed out with everybody else, I actually think he's scared of Leslie's crazy. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments, but I absolutely think Bill is kind of a little low key scared of her. So we learned that he had sent her a cease and desist. Bill tells her she needs to stop slandering his good name. Leslie confronts him about the things that he said and threatened all those years ago. And Bill said he's sure in the court of law that he'll be more believable. This was it, y'all. He said, I'm sure in court I will be more believable than a woman with 5 or more different aliases and 24 wigs. I said, oh my God. Oh, Jesus, that clackback was real. So Leslie says that she doesn't have anything anyway. And so basically, what can you sue me for? Because I ain't got you. Okay. So she leaves, and then Bill calls Ted and tells him, look, I need to see you right now because this bitch just came by my office. Now, Andre walks up in Uptown and he sees Eva having breakfast alone. So then we learn that Eva is there treating herself because it's her birthday. She goes on to tell Andre about how much Ted has really stepped up to help her out with her living arrangements and how Martin invited her over to dinner the night before to spend time with him and the Smarty kids. And so, she's feeling real warm and fuzzy about that and her various ponytails, I still can't let that go. I know I'm petty. So Andre tells her, well, look, it sounds like you are making major progress. And Eva says, well, it does give me a little bit of hope. So he tells her it's good that she sees a future for herself and tells her that everyone needs that. He tells her that he saw Nicole the day before and she's carrying a hurt that, nobody could imagine, right? So Eva's like, oh, I just really hope Ted and Nicole get back together because, I feel so bad. And I love when Andre just looked at her and said, well, wasn't that the plan? for you to try to destroy their whole marriage and their whole lives? Wasn't that a part of the plan? Maybe not your plan, but it was a part of your mama's plan, and you were a part of that, helping carry out that plan. So Andre asks where things stand with Leslie, and Eva says that her mother has not forgiven her. Andre is confused because he was like, well, why do you need forgiveness? And tells Eva, that sounds like she's gaslighting you. Eva defends Five Guys, Leslie, Dana, um, and saying that she understands because she felt betrayed and she was counting on her and she sabotaged her plan. I love when Andre asked her, he's like, so won't Five Guys expect you to kind of like do something to prove your loyalty, prove your, and I was like, yeah, that's coming. That's coming. But she's like, it doesn't, I would never. Eva claims, I would never do anything to hurt Ted and Nicole again because I really want to get to know my father. Okay, girl. So, but you also really need the love of your mama, which is understandable, but even though she crazy as hell. So then we see her get a text from Five Guys asking her to meet up with her at Off Jeans. Then we see Kat go over to Ted's to go see the new Ted, because this is when we get introduced to the new Ted. And what is his name? Keith D. Robinson. So the new Ted, thanks Kat for coming over and lets her know that, and Kat lets him know, okay, I'm still mad. He promises, look, I'm gonna be honest with you. And she's like, oh, really? For a change? That's what we're doing. Honesty is where we're headed. He tells her, look, I'm willing to answer any questions that you have. And so Kat asked him how someone married to her mother, the most amazing woman in the world, could think of turning to a skank like Leslie. And Ted tries to explain that when he first met Five Guys, she wasn't this crazy. He tells her that he missed Nicole's attention and affection, and he ended up finding that in Five Guys. He admits to being a selfish bastard, but says back then Nicole needed way more than she gave. And with Five Guys, he could just be him and not have to do nothing, not really have to put any effort. Kat asked if Nicole had, so Kat was like, well, if mom hadn't gotten pregnant, would you have left her and, went to be with Leslie? Is that the reason why, am I the only reason that you guys are still married? And so Ted said he'd like to think that he would have never left Nicole and Martin. He says he confused Five Guys' lightheartedness with her being a casual person. He said he was doing what he wanted in the moment, and he learned Nicole, was pregnant. And she was also still concerned about miscarrying with Kat. So he admits that, he too suffered from trauma from all the miscarriages that Nicole experienced. And he realized that at this point, at this moment, he was meant to be with Nicole. Okay. So Kat tells him, well, it's a little too late for that revelation because Leslie was already pregnant. And then she asked her father, well, being a doctor, and I love this. Let's talk about sex, baby. I'm from that generation. Let's talk about it. Okay. Because I feel like nowadays people act like still ain't out here. Okay. I ain't trying to get preachy, but yeah, I'm from a generation where we had PBS specials and after school specials on stuff like this. Okay. If your parents weren't talking to you, you was getting it some way. But no, so she's like, you're a doctor. Why wouldn't you wrap it up? And so Ted says that, he was stupid and he believed her when she said she was on birth control. And he says, look, I really did not know about Eva. And so he tells Kat that he knows that she's disappointed in him, but that was before her. And he explains that the father that she knew growing up and the husband she saw love on her mother was real. He's hopeful that she'll trust him again one day. So then Kat gets up and gives him a hug, but tells him, look, don't get it twisted. One conversation won't fix all the pain you've caused. Ted said he knows that, but is there to have more conversations whenever she wants and will answer any other questions that she has. So he tells her, well, you have a standing invitation along with your mother. And then he gives her obviously a copy of his room key. Warning. So DNA both meet up with Naomi and Jacob individually and complain about how they don't like living together. Insane. All right. Chelsea meets up with Kat at Uptown, and Kat tells her about the meeting with Ted and how she actually felt sorry for her daddy. So Chelsea can obviously empathize, and Kat says that she doesn't want to feel anything but furious at this point. However, that is her daddy. So then she apologizes to tell Chelsea. She's like, you know what? I know I probably haven't been the most sympathetic, especially when dealing with your parent situation. Chelsea tells her, it's okay, girl. You learn what you learn. So Kat questions how they're supposed to ever fall in love or trust anyone after what their fathers did. And I was like, yo, that's some real stuff, especially the way Kat grew up seeing Ted love on Nicole. So I absolutely understand. Chelsea tells her, at least Ted is trying to make it right. And I said, is he? I guess. So she reminds her that, it could be worse. Leslie could be your stepmom. And so Kat said, oh, thank God for small favors. So Kat and Chelsea start to piece together the whole story about Eva and Leslie, and how this was all a part of their evil plot. Because, Kat be clocking everything. She's sitting there just literally, it's like a puzzle, and she just putting it together. And so Chelsea was like, well, could she really even do that? Because Eva had a hard time even following through with her mother's plan. And Kat reminds her, that Eva didn't know us yet. So I could absolutely see her doing whatever Leslie asked of her. And she said, and if she didn't do it, she knows who did. And then she runs off to go tell her daddy about her theory. Meanwhile, Ted shows up in Bill's office and he asks Ted, what actions have you taken to neutralize Dana, aka Five Guys? Ted says none, because I'm not thinking about her. My focus is clearing up the mess from all the damage that she's caused to my family. And Bill warns him, you're not thinking about what her next move is, and that's what you need to be. And I was like, well, that's what I'm telling y'all. Bill's concerned about her. I've never seen Bill act like this with anybody that we've seen him dealt with. Let's just keep it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, y'all. That's what we're here for. Have conversations, y'all. Get in the comments. But yeah, something about it for me tells me that Bill's a little scared of her. So Ted is confused, and Bill lets her know that, look, Dana is still wreaking havoc. And she was just in my office about the cease and desist that I sent her. And Bill says, look, I warned her that I can sue her for defamation. But he said, but what you need to do is remind her that she can also catch criminal charges for blackmail. And I said, oh, right. So Ted then thinks that, oh, he's teaming up with Leslie because why would he bring up blackmail? Because I just gave her some money. And so he was like, oh, so she must have told you about the payment. And he was like, no, but it clearly has to be blackmail because one, she came in here talking about she was broke, and said, look, I am in this mess because I stepped in to help you. So I expect you to back me up. So then Naomi walks in, not surprised to see the two cheaters linking up. Okay. Naomi let him know she's there to get some clarity on the text that she sent to her daddy. And Bill tells her, look, I'm in the middle of something, clearly. And she does address her Uncle Ted, which I would say shout out to Naomi for being respectful and, regardless. And tells him that, I'm sorry to hear what happened to you. And Ted's like, thank you. And I'm really just focused on making everything right. So Naomi tells him, well, that's refreshing. And says, Dad, you could use Uncle Ted as a role model. And I said, maybe not so much. Bill says that, well, he did talk to Dana, but claims that he didn't threaten her and asked Ted. And he's like, right, Ted? Right? And so, of course, Ted is like, look, I wasn't there, but I don't believe Bill would I would never mess with Bill if he would do something like that. And I was like, good and damn well Bill would do something like that. So Eva meets up with Leslie, and all Leslie shows her. So Eva finally meets up with Leslie, and she's showing her the cease and desist. So Eva tells her that, you know what, you should have expected something like this after the party. So Five Guys thinks that, Bill should have had more shame for all of the things that he did in the past. And she asks Eva, well, since you're getting so close with your daddy, why don't you try to talk to him so he can get Bill off my back? She says she knows Ted, and she doesn't, and he knows her. And he knows that she doesn't deserve to be treated like this. And so Eva starts to put two and two together. So she's like, oh, so you only called me down here for Ted. And Eva's like, you do remember it's my birthday, right? And Leslie reminds her, yes, we celebrated your birthday. Yeah, before you betrayed me and stabbed me in the back. Yeah, I do. Yes, I know what day you were born. Again, y'all, I know I may be reaching. I still don't think this lady is her mama. I'm sorry. I still don't think this lady is her mama. So Eva tells her she understands that, look, I understand you're upset with me. I wasn't getting a party, but I thought you would at least would have thought about me, right? Send me a text saying happy birthday. Um, Okay. And Leslie tells her, look, I'm sorry, it slipped my mind. It's hard to think about it when I got all these threats hanging over my head. She reminds Eva that, she came to her wanting to make amends the other day and said, and now here's your chance. And so Eva said, no, that's what I'm not doing. I'm not going to be the go-between you and Ted. And so then she adds on, and really, you shouldn't be worried about the cease and desist. You should be more concerned with getting hit with criminal charges. And she's like, well, sooner or later, the Richardsons are going to put pieces together, which we see happening. And eventually we'll have the same questions she did on whether you have something to do with Laura being in the hospital. And said, and how are you going to handle that? And do you have an alibi? I said, okay, Eva. You decided to show up to work today. Go ahead, girl. No, I'm just playing with you. You always show up, but I like this, Eva. So when it's towards the right person, I like that, Eva. Well, Leslie tells her she doesn't think that that's her problem, and reminds her, well, you didn't want to be involved, and gets up and leaves while she, as she wishes her a happy birthday on her way out the door. And so then we see Andre pop up at Garland. He's down at the hospital making small talk with Ashley. They talk about Derek, and Ashley lets him know that he moved in, and he congratulates them. And then Derek runs to the hospital with the idea that maybe we could solve all our problems if we get a bigger place. And Ashley said, no, I think our problems go far beyond just physical space. And I said, finally. And that is the only reason why I gave y'all that much. Because I said, Ashley is finally admitting that she don't like that man. I synced it. But we all synced it. I mean, she liked him a little bit, but yeah. So Naomi's at the hospital and she's showing June the photo that she dropped and asked her, well, who are these kids? And June says that, oh, I don't really know, but I know I like the picture and it makes me happy. So to all of my BTG Shade Squad in the comments that said that y'all think that this is the Smarty Kid's mother. Okay. I can get on it. I'll get on at the next stop. I'll get on at the next stop. Okay. I'll get on that train and we'll see what happens. Kat goes by her father's hotel room, but of course he's not there. There's a knock at the door, and of course it could be none other than Five Guys. So Kat asks, well, what should I call you? Dana, Leslie, Anna, Sherry. And I was like, and little do you know, you have not met Lulu. Okay. So Five Guys tells her, you should call me your almost stepmom. I said, oh no. And Kat was like, oh no. Never in life. That would never ever happen. Okay. So then of course, Leslie walks in and I was like, why do we just let people randomly walk in to our sanctuaries? And I'm such a big person about people bringing energies and spirit. Why are we just letting people walk up in our space? That's supposed to be sad. I can't. So anyway, but in the meantime, in between time, while Five Guys is walking around looking for Ted, Kat starts recording her on the phone, and Kat confronts Five Guys and says that, you know what, I feel like you resent me because my dad chose me basically rather than being with you. And so Leslie said, you know what, he's grown. He made his own choices and decisions. And look, now he's paying for them because they were clearly bad ones. Okay. So Kat reminds her that, you know what, but other people were hurt, not just my dad. And Five Guys said, oh yeah, I know. She said, Nicole might have been a little collateral damage. And Kat's like, no. But what about Laura? What did you do to her? And then Kat makes it clear that she thinks it was either her or Eva that did something to Laura. So Leslie realizes why the reason Kat is there is to warn Ted about Eva. And she asks if, it was just some crazy coincidence. Leslie then says crazy. The way that she looked when she's okay. So then Kat is talking about, oh, so it just must be some crazy coincidence that, Eva randomly got this job after Laura was run off the road. And the way Five Guys looked when she said crazy, and she said, that's not my preferred word. That was scary. I don't know if you saw the look on her face. If I was Kat, I would have been alarmed. And I'm gonna need, I know this is not real life, right? But I'm gonna need Kat to stop filming with her. Not like on set, you know what I mean? Like, if you knew somebody was ape crazy, why do we keep putting ourselves in isolated situations and scenarios alone for them to act out on their crazy thoughts? I don't know. I wouldn't feel safe, but that's just me. All right. And Kat asks, well, are you admitting that Eva ran Laura off the road? And Leslie tells her, you're right. And you're right about that. Like you've been right about everything else. And so Kat calls her and she's like, what is these riddles? She was like, you're like a demented Yoda. I said, I love me some Kat. Leslie starts going into her detailed description about how she ran Laura off the road and tells her, look, you ain't got no proof, no witnesses, and no records. You ain't got nothing. And she said, and I would never testify against my own daughter. And so she knows that that's going to drive Kat crazy. That, she has all these suspicions and can't do anything about it. And then she walks out and Kat stops the recording and says, gotcha. Well, she ain't add that last part. I added that. And then we see Andre go to meet up with Ted. And Ted says that, Nicole still is not ready to talk to him, but he's hopeful that this is what it was. It wasn't episode 54. It was episode 53. This is it. He said that he's hopeful that after talking to Kat, she will go back and talk to her mom and be able to convince her to talk to him. Brother, was anybody's flabbergasted? Because mine was. I said, is this what we're doing? We're working through, like, no, you. I ain't seen a floral arrangement arrive at that house yet. I'll move on because we got another episode to do, and eventually I am gonna have to leave the house. But really, so yeah, y'all. That was so anyway. So then basically Andre lets him know, yeah, I did see Nicole. She was struggling. He also mentions running into Eva and how hopeful she is about their, establishing a relationship. And so Ted says that he wants to step up for Eva because she grew up raised by a crazy person. And Andre mentions that, well, it's Eva's birthday. And so Ted is like, well, what can I do for a daughter that I barely know? And so Andre agrees that, he has an idea and he's going to help him out. And that was episode 53 of Beyond the Gates. Okay. So we are getting ready to pivot and go into episode 54. So if you haven't watched already, this is where you will want to stop the video. Danny has decided to take Pamela to Joey's casino. And Pamela's like, well, why are we here? Because I don't know nothing about gambling. And Danny says, I have some plans to make us some money so we can help start up this agency. So they sit down at the table and they start flirting with the dealer. And Danny and Pamela play him and tell him that if he plays his cards right, they'll have him half naked in some fashion magazine. And I said, well, do you, boo-boo? It's all what? It's all in who you know, right? So Leslie gets a knock at the door. And it is Ted. Basically letting her know, look, I'm getting some people together for lunch since it's Eva's birthday. And Five Guys says, everybody keeps reminding me of that. So Ted asked, well, would you care to join? I don't want to impose on any plans that you might have for her. And Leslie's like, I ain't got no plans for her. And she said she curses that day and it was the worst day of her life. And Ted tells her, who says monsters are only in fairy tales? And I said, you better tell her, Ted. So then Ted blames Leslie and says that everything that Eva has done has been because of how she's raised her for the most part. And she's like, well, Eva grew up fatherless. And he reminded her, no, Eva had a stepfather. And Leslie's like, no, she needed you. And he says, well, how could I have known if you kept her? And Leslie asked, well, why wouldn't she? She was a souvenir of our love. I said, not you just comparing your daughter to a keychain, not a shot glass. Oh my God. So Ted asked if that's her way of punishing Eva. Asked how she could look at her face and not want to protect her. And Leslie claims every time she looked at her, she saw him. She said she loves Eva so much it hurts because it's a reminder of their love and the life she could have had. And Ted reminds her, look, you said you were ending the situation. And she said, well, that was the first and the last lie that I ever told you. And said, but how many lies have you told me? How many lies have you told Nicole or Martin? And then said, liar, liar, pants on fire. I said, I can't. I mean, I gotta admit, Trisha, I don't know her last name, but or Trish, she plays an amazing villain. It's an enjoyable villain, right? So she says next to him, she's basically squeaky clean. And so Ted says all he knows is that Eva is a victim of a deranged mother. And Leslie says he's right. So now Jacob is at the hospital when he gets a text from Kat asking him where he is, because we know Kat got the information um, from the recording, and of course she wants to run and play it for him. So, but they're there because they worried about June, and he goes into the hospital room, and Naomi and Doug are there. Doug shares that June has a severe case of pneumonia and she's got to have surgery. So June is trying to speak through this oxygen mask. And when they finally take it off, June says that if Doug is the one cutting her, she'd rather take her chances on the street. I said, I like me some June. Doug tries to calm her and says that, he'll be in there in a supervisory capacity, but it'll actually be Dr. Wilkes who'll be doing her procedure. So she's like, well, I just want to make sure he got to with everything. And my notes say, damn, June. So Dr. Wilkes does come in and lets her know he's going to take good care of her. Jacob speaks up and asks, well, can we just wait till Doug is healed? Respectfully, Dr. Wilkes. And Dr. Wilkes said, yeah, but because of June's pneumonia and it's lessening the flow to her heart, we need to do this bypass surgery immediately, or her heart can be significantly damaged forever. Now, back over at the Dupree household, Vernon is blasting the articulates when Anita comes into the room. And she's like, what are you doing? Okay. So Anita picks up on Vernon basically poking her and saying, and like, what's going on? What's going on with the articulates? Have you called your group mates? What are we doing? What's up with this reunion? And she's like, I'll do it in my own time. But she says, I really do want to do this reunion, a one night only event. And Vernon's like, you should, you won't regret it. And so then they hear the doorbell and it happens to be Bill. Anita tells him that she thought she smelled fire and brimstone. And she said, usually it's speak of the devil and he will appear. But there he is, unannounced and uninvited. I said, yes, Anita. Bill says he brought the papers over for the sale from the beach house and wanted to bring them over to them to avoid any chaos with Danny. Now, Vernon knows. I love when Vernon said, and are you not familiar with courier services? So Anita asked Vernon, she said, do you get the feeling that he here for something else? And they're like, yeah. So Bill says, you know what? We were once family before the divorce. And Anita adds, and the affair? I said, And he says, look, I know it won't happen overnight, but I'm hopeful that we can all put our differences behind us. And Bill says, Ted's actions were his own, and he set those wheels in motion, not him. So Anita said, look, if you're looking for some type of forgiveness, you have a lot more work to do, as she opens the door to let him out. She also lets him know that he needs to request an appointment before showing up again, unannounced and uninvited, and then puts his ass out. And so then Vernon tells her she needs to take that fire and use it for good so she can call an old friend or call her old friends. And so Vanessa, y'all, I don't know what's going on with Vanessa. Is she into some like, I'm not kink shaming. Is she like into the S&M or it was really giving like 50 shades of gray. Okay. Because Vanessa's at Off Your Jeans when some strange stalker looking man, this is what my notes say, named Cody comes up. He says he liked what they did. And Vanessa asked him if he needs more. And he mentioned something with her feet. And so then she tells him that if he wants it again, he has to obey the rules and basically warns that if you come around following me again, we're done. And so Cody says, yes, ma'am, and runs off. I said, okay. Vanessa, I don't know. I don't know. Are you, did you go from calling the escort to being the escort? Inquiring minds want to know. So Shanice comes over to talk to Naomi and Jacob. She lets them know that Dr. Wilkes had an emergency and he had to run out, but Joan is being prepped for her surgery. So Naomi asked, well, who's going to do it? And Shanice was like, well, we still trying to figure that out, girl. So she reassures them that, look, Dr. McBride will be supervising, and there's several doctors on hand. She'll be good. Naomi still ain't going for it. She's like, this is not what June wanted. And this is when I wanted to be, shut up, Naomi. Shut up, please. So Shanice explains that no surgery is 100% guarantee, as we know. And Doug, Doug is assembling the best team as he oversees. So Kat walks in and tells Jacob that she has this information that will blow his mind. And she tells him that she had a conversation with Leslie about Eva running Laura off the road and plays the recording for him. Smitty has come over to see Nicole about Martin. She asked him, well, what's going on? And Smitty's like, I'm hopeful that you can provide some insight into what's going on with my husband. So he's like, what's the one goal that Martin has already strived for, whether he did it consciously or not? And so she's like, okay, running for presidency. And Smitty questions, so what would make him give up that dream? So Nicole is like questioning Smitty about whether Martin said he was taking a break or if he's really done. And so Smitty said, I'm not sure, but he knows to run, you have to stay in the spotlight at a certain capacity to keep up the momentum. So Nicole starts to pick up what Smitty is putting down at this point. And so she's like, well, do you know the reason for his change of heart? And Smitty explains that he claims that it was about the kids and not wanting to turn their lives upside down. And so Nicole was like, well, that's a plausible, reason. And Smitty's like, no, because when I said it, he told me I was crazy and didn't want to hear nothing I had to say. And I was like, well, touche, Smitty, that was true. So Nicole wonders, well, yeah, I wonder what, made him change his mind as well. And then Smitty said, well, I think it also may have something to do with the fact that his daddy just had an affair. And I was like, poor Nicole, you got to keep hearing this. And then he found out he got a sister that he didn't know about. And I said, we just going to keep rubbing salt in the wound for poor Nicole, okay? And then he mentions the nightmares, which does catch Nicole's attention. So, and Smitty asks, like, if he should be worried. And so they get interrupted by Vanessa, because apparently Nicole, I guess, had reached out to her. And so he tells her, you know what, don't worry about it. We can bounce ideas off each other later. And he tries to get out before Vanessa pounces on him. Okay. Now, Anita, back at the debris house, finally tells Vernon about Sharon hanging up on her when she called. And she admitted that it hurt. And she said she's worrying about calling her other group mate, Tracy. Anita says she doesn't know what to say and finally asks, like, why are you so invested in making this happen? And so Vernon, I thought this was sweet. And Vernon just explains, like, when I'm on stage and I see you in the audience smiling at me and, when I'm doing my thing, it's motivating. He tells her, I see the same thing when you got up there and did the karaoke night. And he said that he tells her that maybe Tracy and Sharon have been waiting on this call for years. Vernon suggests to her that if it's too much trouble to get the ladies on board, you could always just do it solo. You were the Beyonce. Okay. And Anita lets Vernon know that, you know what, let me worry about how I handle communicating with Sharon and Tracy. And so he fires back, oh, so that just means not at all. And I love, Anita said, wrong road. Okay. So he realizes that it's deep, and she said, "Yeah, it is, and you got no idea how deep it is." So then Vernon goes on and he says he knows a thing or two about bringing people together, and so he tells her to appeal to Tracy's love for church, um, which is crazy. That, but he tells her to appeal for Tracy's love to church, and he tells her if she does that, she'll come running back. So Anita said, "You know what? Sometimes people can't get past the past, and that's what she's really afraid of." So now Kat is on back at Garland. Kat is telling Jacob, "So we need to move forward. So what do we do? Do we issue a warrant?" Like, and Jacob's like, calm down, Kat." He lets her know that, look, at this point, this is hearsay. And so Kat's like, okay, but maybe you should listen to it again. And so she brings up how the only people she, kind of spotlights, the only people that benefited from Laura being hurt was Eva and Leslie and Five Guys. So Jacob asks, well, look, if you feel so strongly, then Jacob says, well, do you feel so strongly because y'all are related? And Kat makes it clear, just because they're related does not make them family. And I said, you better. He basically tells Kat that she's annoying him, but says, you know what, you can send me the record and I will listen to it again. And then he spots Doug and Shanice. So that now has his full attention. And he tells Kat that, he'll be in touch. Doug comes out and lets them know that June's surgery went well and she's recovering, and he has to run off in the streets, which we know means the casino that I could have sworn Joey forbade him from. But who am I? Now Leslie is telling Ted her birthing story with Eva and how she was in pain not only from labor but because she was lonely. She talks about how she prayed Ted would come and track her down, and Ted apologizes, for her being alone. She said she didn't know where to turn, but she was also worried about Bill and what he might do. And so then Ted tells her that, but then she tells Ted, I spared you so you could live happily with your real family. She admits to doing things that she wish she hadn't. And she said, but this is your second chance to do right by us. And I said, it's really the delusion for me, sis. So Danny and Pamela are still at the casino plotting on their plans for their agency to take off. They play for the name of the agency, like, they bet. When they see Doug walk in and Joey isn't too far behind him. So he lets them know that, oh, I'm surprised to see you because I assume that if you're here, you must have my money. I understand that. Um, and he said, well, I was in the OR today and soon I'm gonna be able to go back to work and do some overtime and, pay back what I owe. And Joey tells him, you'll be 80 by the time you're able to even pay off the interest, much less the principal, my brother. So Doug asks him to be reasonable. And Joey says, well, he is being reasonable after being nickeled and dimed, and tells Doug, I feel like you don't respect me. You're playing in my face. And so he reminds him that he gave him a week to pay him back, and he wants to know how he plans to do so to get out of this jam. And then Danny asks Pamela what she thinks, or no. So then Danny notices and is like, what do you think Doug is doing here in the middle of the day? And Pamela said, girl, so are we. And then they quickly move on because Pamela has points. Then she brings up how Joey's Instagram is full of him cooking and suggests that, you should go follow him. He like a whole little chef. He be up there Ramseying and, making the risotto. So Joey tells him to call Vanessa and says, if you don't, then I will. All right. Now, Nicole breaks the news to Vanessa that I called you over here because I'm thinking I want to sell my house. She talks about, it has so many memories and I just want something new now that Ted is gone. So she's like, do you mind listing it for me? And Vanessa's like, no, I'm not doing that. And Vanessa's like, look, as your friend, I would say selling the house might seem like a good idea now, but you might feel differently a year from now. And I love when Nicole was like, if y'all don't stop with this year, like for real. But she does thank her for, kind of making her think a little bit more rationally versus emotionally. Now, Bill has met up with Smitty at All Free Jeans. And Smitty lets him know that he asked him there to talk about Martin, but says he wants him to elaborate on what he meant by it was important for him and Martin to be on the same team. And Bill tells him he wouldn't look that deep into it and, just tries to shrug it off and says that he probably meant families shouldn't turn their backs on each other just because they don't agree. Well, Smitty comes outright and asks if there's something that Bill doesn't want the public to know about, and does it involve Martin? So Bill advises him, well, you should ask your husband. And Smitty says, well, he's learned the ugly truths of the Dupree family have a way of making themselves known. And he says his job is to protect his family. And if whatever is going on can affect Martin or his family, then he wants to know. So Bill tells him that secrets and lies are what maintains a marriage. Of course it does, Bill. And so Smitty isn't here for Bill's marital advice and wants to know why he mentioned they should be on the same team again. And Bill says it's because of his connections and, obviously Martin's political aspirations. And he can help him get to certain places, which we know is bull, right? So Naomi and Jacob go see June once she's out of surgery. She's still ragging on Doug being a one-handed surgeon. And I said, June don't let up, but she cute though. June is starting to grow on me. Jacob gets a call and he has to go. And so Naomi, wants to stay, but finally June and Shanice kick her out respectfully. Then we see Anita, who has called Tracy. It seems like what seems like to be a decent conversation. As soon as she gets off the phone, she's excited. She tells Vernon that Tracy is coming to town and she didn't think about where she was going to stay. She says, hey, she's going to stay here and she's coming over for dinner. And she said, but I didn't bring up anything about the reunion. I'm just so happy that she's willing to even come to dinner. And I said, well, I guess it's a step in the right direction. But Tracy looked like she coming to get her lick back in a different way. Get her lick back. Get her lick back. Get her lick back. Let me stop. I'm sleepy, y'all. I really need to go to bed. All right. And then we see Leslie at home watching a movie at home alone when Jacob knocks on her door and says, look, I need you to come down to the station, ma'am. And yeah, so that was this episode 54 of Beyond the Gates. I appreciate you guys for being here. If you have not already, please make sure that you've hit the like button. Make sure that you guys comment. Make sure that you subscribe. And make sure you hit the notification bell. Make sure you're following us on all the platforms. That's the Blue Sky, IG, TikTok, and the Facebook. And yeah, I will catch you next Thursday, y'all. Yeah, guys, have a great weekend. Be safe. And I will catch you when I get back. I love you guys. Bye-bye.